Trade rumors are continuing to escalate involving the Pittsburgh Penguins and one player in particular that we're going to break down in this video. And Kyle Dubas has a massive decision looming in the next little while. We're going to break that down as well because this will have Penguins fans very surprised as to what the lineup might look like and who's going to be going out the door this summer. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Penguins Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 68% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the Pittsburgh Penguins, go down below, hit that free subscribe button because this is the place to be for all your daily Pittsburgh Penguins content. But Mark, let's jump right into it. I covered Bryan Rust the other day because there's a lot of trade rumors flying around with the Pittsburgh Penguins right now. And I dare to even say trade reports at this point because it looks like they're actively shopping a couple players. But we're not covering Bryan Rust in this one. We're going to touch on two other players, but one in particular, and that is Rickard Rakell. And there is a report from The Score, and not only them, but we're going to get into some more from other insiders, that the Penguins are actively taking calls on Bryan Rust and Rickard Rakell. Now, let's pump the brakes for a little bit. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to trade them, and I actually don't. They're definitely not trading both of them. I'll tell you that. They could trade one, but they're definitely not trading both of them. But what do you make of this initial report? Obviously, we know that, they're taking calls on them. There's a lot of interest league-wide. There's multiple teams. But before we jump into, some of the teams that are interested, where they can go, and what this means for the Penguins, what do you make of this initial report?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is when looking around the league, a lot of teams struck out in free agency. They didn't get the forwards they want. They didn't get the center and so on. So I do believe the Penguins are going to be a hot commodity. A lot of these teams are going to actively look to add 30 goal scorers. We've seen Rakell and Russ really step up, having career years last year. So I think with Dubas being linked to so many teams with trade talks, I think it's a lot of teams going into panic mode. Teams that are on the crisp of being a contender, wanting to add that extra piece or what they think is the extra piece they need. So one thing is looking at, you don't want to move out everyone on this roster. When you move everyone, you have Sidney Crosby and a lot of guys that don't have experience or have not proven themselves. With these guys, you get experience and proven 30 goal scorers. But I do think Dubas is in the perfect situation to find a desperate team to take calls on. And if someone's going to go out and offer you the moon, you have to accept an offer. And I do agree. I think it's going to be one of these guys because you can't completely scorch earth if you still have the veterans on this roster.
Yeah, if you trade both of them, I mean, who are you going to have left on the team? Sidney Crosby, Evgeni Malkin, who he's done at the end of this year, whether it's in the NHL or just with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then a bunch of kids at this point, right? So you have to insulate them with some really good players. So they have to hang on to at least one of them. Now, some of the teams that are linked, you can see here per David Pagnotta, he said that the Ottawa Senators have been linked to Rickard Rakell specifically, maybe not Bryan Rust, but Rickard Rakell. Not only that, we also have reports that the Montreal Canadiens are interested in Penguins forward Rickard Rakell. And there was an interesting article here from Josh where, just to reiterate some of what you said, they're not going to trade either of these guys for something that isn't significant. They want a significant return for guys who've had career years like Rickard Rakell, for example. And I want to dive into his stats here real quick. That, in 81 games, he played almost every single game last year. He only missed one. He had 70 points. This was a career year for him. He was an even player in terms of goals and assist output. He had 35 and 35. This is a really good player who's only just 32 years old. There's a lot of teams, like you said, on the, the cusp of being a contender, maybe like the Montreal Canadiens, like the Ottawa Senators, that would love to add a player like this. But Pittsburgh and Kyle Dubas are not going to do it unless there's a huge return. And one other thing I thought was interesting from the article is that Erik Karlsson's actually open to a trade as long as it's to a few specific teams. So that does make things a little more difficult, obviously, for Kyle Dubas, but he is open to being moved. So there could be some movement there too. But to stay with Rickard Rakell, a lot of people are throwing out crazy mock trades. This one, you get to dump Ryan Graves, which is looking like a terrible contract with Rickard Rakell. You get Patrick Laine on an expiring contract at $8.7 million and Mike Matheson back to the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I thought that was, it's interesting. There's no backing to it or anything, but, we can at least start having the conversation. But like you brought up, I want your thoughts on this too. I mean, this is a player that I think can help a lot of teams, but also help the Pittsburgh Penguins, right? Like he had a career high year. He had 35 goals, 35 assists, 70 points, almost a point a game player, which is pretty impressive on a team that, let's face it, the Pittsburgh Penguins weren't a very good team last year. So, would you hang on to this player? I think that you need to insulate some of the younger guys with talent like this. You can't just scorch scorched earth, like you said, and trade them away for nothing. If you're going to trade them away, it's got to be for a significant return.
And I think the big thing is a career high in points, 35 goals. His value is going to be high, but you need veteran leadership around this team. Yes, down the middle, Crosby, Malkin. You still have Letang. If Karlsson's not moved, you have him as well. But I do think having veterans mixed with it, you don't want to go the route of the Chicago Blackhawks where you're putting not great veterans in Nick Foligno. No hate on any of these guys, but they're not as happy when it comes to scoring as we're seeing Rakell and Russ. That team didn't do great, so you don't want to do this. But I do think it's interesting. I mean, the Ottawa Senators are a team that went to, 5 or 6 versus the Toronto Maple Leafs last year, looking to add that little extra punch. We're seeing the Montreal Canadiens adding Noah Dobson, still wanting to get better. Both these teams make sense. If Erik Karlsson wants to go back to Ottawa, package him off for picks. But I do think you have to keep one or two of these three players in Karlsson, Russ, and Rakell. But it's going to get really interesting because if Dubas sits down, 3 phone calls, they're overpayments on all 3. I would not be shocked if he's kind of got his hands tied and moves them out, but you got to get veterans back in this move as well.
Yeah, and I think that if you're moving out all 3, let's say, or at least 2, Brian Rust, for the sake of this video, Brian Rust and Rickard Rakell, the returns got to have to be insane if you're moving out both of them, because you need to keep some of these guys, like you said, on the team. The Chicago Blackhawks are a prime example of how not to do it. They're way too young. They have no veteran leadership, like you said. Well, maybe a couple pieces. I don't want to discredit Foligno, right? But, they have some leadership pieces there, but not top-end scorers or guys who can put up points and lead the way in that way, right? So very, very interesting. Kyle Dubas, this was before July 1st, so keep that in mind. But Kyle Dubas on potential trades involving Erik Karlsson, Rickard Rakell, or Brian Rust. And he went on to say, I know more about the free agent market because of the calls we've gotten on our veteran guys. Teams say that the market is nuts. We might have more interest in doing a deal or a trade because the market is so crazy like that. And the other thing to keep in mind, the only team that's selling, I want your thoughts on this too, Mark. The only team that's selling in the entire National Hockey League right now is the Pittsburgh Penguins, right? So you can get a massive return for these players because teams like Ottawa are trying to make a run, like you said, to compete with the other teams in their division. Montreal just made the playoffs. They want to repeat that, right? So they'd be more open to giving up a lot of pieces in return for a player that can make a difference, like a Rakell right away. And not to discredit Brian Rust, but of course, we covered that in a previous video. Go check that one out. But what are your thoughts on that? I think that, the Pittsburgh Penguins might be the only team selling in the NHL. And, if you're going to sell, it might have to be right now before the season starts because so many teams are looking to upgrade in those ways.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. Dubas has the head start. All these teams, every single team minus the Pittsburgh Penguins, and there's snippets from general manager Bill Guerin of the Minnesota Wild said every team is pretty much at this point trying to get better. So you're having this one team that knows where they want to go. Other teams think they're a contender or trying to push into it. So if you can sell early before you get into training camp, if a team finds out, hey, maybe we're not going to make the playoffs, and they start selling, you got to get ahead of this market. I think Dubas is doing a good job, or as much as he can. The draft was questionable. Some of his moves been, but I think he's going in the right direction of sell while these players are so high. You can get back low-risk, high-reward players in this as well. But I think Dubas has to act fast before the market either dries up or someone else looks at their team and says, hey, maybe we should start selling as well.
Absolutely. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Kyle Dubas has up his sleeve and if he plans to move off of 1, 2, 3 of these guys, maybe move off of none of them. It's going to be very interesting to see what he ends up doing. But we want to hear what you have to say in the comments. Which of the 3 would you move off of? Would you move off of any of them as well? Because I know there's a lot of fans that don't want to trade Brian Rust, that's for sure. But Rakell, I think, is an interesting one because he can help a lot of teams. And if you're keeping one of these players, I think trading one is okay for the return that you're probably going to get for them. But again, if there's nothing out there, don't make the trade. But let us know how you feel in the comments. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything Pittsburgh Penguins.